Welcome to Blue Collar Reformation. PBR here again, back on screen, back on camera. Today we're going to be talking about a passage from the scriptures and giving some explanation of it connected with our series on biblical symbolism. The passage is Matthew 27, verses 50 through 53, the signs after the cross. So that's what's before us, and I'm going to read it and then I'll explain. So, Matthew 27, verses 50 and following. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. So these are the signs that come after the death of Christ, and they have symbolic meaning as well as being miraculous signs themselves. So at the same time as having like a proof power that they have of that Jesus really is the Son of God, which is what is proclaimed by the centurion in the next verse after this paragraph. What we see here is that these signs also have symbolic meaning. If you look at verse 50 says that Jesus cried out and yielded up his spirit. But the question is, to where? Where did he yield up his spirit to? Well, I would submit that it's to paradise that day because that fits with the entire context, but also because he said as much to the thief next to him on the cross that today you'll be in paradise with me. In Acts chapter 2, in Peter's sermon, he explains that he was not to undergo decay and that death could not hold him. And at this time, he had said, "It is paid in full, it is finished," and he yielded up his spirit to the Father, not to be sent anywhere else, but rather he yielded up his spirit to paradise that day. Then in verse 51, there's the sign of the veil and the earthquake. First off, the veil. The veil is the door to God's presence, and that's actually going to be the main thing we're going to talk about today. It's the doorway to God's presence, the entrance to God. The earthquake is a symbol of the resurrection and new creation. In Hebrews chapter 12, verses 26 to 28, he explains that yet once more, when the psalmist says that, yet once more, that the things that are will be shaken and the things that will remain forever will last. So earthquakes symbolize the decreation of the old world and the new creation of the world that is to come of the resurrection. It will be a bodily world, a physical world, and will be the result of the destruction and recreation of the universe. And then verse 52, the graves were open and the dead rose. So what we have in all of these things is the same basic meaning, is that Jesus in his death brought life, that the death had effectual power to bring about life. There is no longer the bond of sin against his people or on him as becoming sin for us, and therefore death could not hold him, and death cannot hold those who believe upon Christ. So the real transaction of the covenant, the event of Christ taking on humanity and dying as one of us, the eternal God took on a human nature and represented us to the point of death so that he would become sin for us, die for us, but then the bond of sin against us, the legal standing of sin, the legal reason for sin being broken, now he has risen from the grave, and we who believe in him will also rise too. So that's the basic meaning of the passage. But the next thing to look at is the symbol of the veil, particularly. So it says the veil of the temple was torn in two. There's some debate about whether it's the inner veil or the outer veil, because there's veils basically to the holy place and then the Holy of Holies. But we have to look at veils because I don't think it really matters which one it is because they all symbolize the same thing. They mean access to God. For example, in Eden, in the Garden of Eden, you have a cherubim who's stationed at the entrance of the garden. So Adam and Eve are cast out, and then God places a cherub there with a flaming sword who keeps them out of the garden. The way is closed for them, they cannot enter in. You have Noah's Ark. In Noah's Ark, you also have a door on the side of the ark. The Lord closed the door on the world that then was. Those who were inside the ark were safe and saved, symbol of Christ and his church, that Christ is the ark. Those in him are saved, according to 1 Peter chapter 3. But the ark has a door. And we also see in the tabernacle that they had a door for the tent of meeting. that they would assemble at the door of the tent of meeting. And the first thing you did when you would come to the tabernacle and you bring your sacrifices, you'd be met by a priest at the door where the animal will be killed for you and then placed upon the altar, symbolic of Christ's death and blood for you. So to have access to God in the tabernacle where he dwelled with his people, you had to have a sacrifice for you that would allow you in the door. So to get into the door of where God is, to have access to God, you had to have a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice, to basically be able to go into the presence of God. And then you have the beautiful gate that David built that leads into the stronghold of Jerusalem. So in Jerusalem, you have the temple walls, and then you have the stronghold that David built. And to be able to enter into that stronghold, you had to go through the beautiful gate. And when David conquered Jerusalem, he said that nobody with any of the things that disqualified them from entering the tabernacle could enter into the stronghold either. So things like being a hunchback or a dwarf, or having crushed genitals, or having an uncleanness or something like that, you are kept out, blind, crippled, those kinds of things, because what is symbolized is the presence of God in heaven in the resurrection. You're entering into heaven when you enter into worship. You're entering into heaven when you enter these places. And therefore, symbolically, those things that have to do with the curse, being crippled or being maimed in different ways, basically was excluded because they symbolized the old creation that is now going away. Jesus spoke of a narrow gate. He explained that the way is narrow and the path is straight that leads to life. And when he talks about the narrow gate, what they would understand is that these gates have symbolic meaning. The only gate is through Jesus himself, God the Son in the flesh, who is the way, the truth, and the life to get to the Father. No one comes to the Father but through him. So the reason for these symbols is that symbols are stable. They keep their meaning, as I've been talking about in the series on symbolism. They have their meaning very simply in real physical things that God has given. So it originates in the Garden of Eden. They're not allowed back into the garden. And there's a cherub with a flaming sword. And they're not able to come back in to the garden because of that. And the tabernacle then is symbolizing access to God. The temple is access to God. The ark is access to God. And finally, Christ is the access we have to God. So the point is this: it's not just about the death of Christ. The death of Christ leads to the resurrection because the bond of sin is paid. The resurrection does not just lead to us having living bodies again so that we can go on our merry way and be happy. The resurrection happens because of access to God. The main thing here is that we have the enjoyment, communion, and glorification of God, which satisfies our existence to the very core. So, the point of this is to understand that Jesus effectually brought life from the dead when he died. But not only did he give life, but the veil shows us that he gave us access. Moses, when he met God with the word when he was young, believed himself to be the deliverer, according to Stephen in Acts 6. Then he met God in the wilderness when he met him as the burning bush. Then he met God as a pillar of fire and the angel of the Lord. And then he met God in the darkness. And then he met God and he asked God, "Show me your glory." And you know what God did? After all that Moses had learned of God's holiness, his light, his glory, the darkness of God's unlimited nature, when he asked to see God's glory, God said, "You can't see my glory." But he passed by and he told him who he is. He gave him a structure of his name in Exodus chapter 34. He told him what he's like. Everything we have in life and every doctrine we have of this world, the doctrine of sin, doctrine of the church, doctrine of the civil magistrate, as important as those are, they will go away except from our memory to give thanks to God when we enter into heaven. We'll remember them and we'll give thanks, but they will go away as far as practical doctrines. What lasts forever is the communion with God, the doctrine of God, the limitless nature of God, so that we can learn about him, commune with him, and know him more and more forever and ever. This is PBR signing off. Thank you for watching Blue Collar Reformation. We are here to equip you with wisdom of the Word. The aim is to apply the system of doctrine taught in Scripture to every square inch of faith in life. We are on Twitter and Substack for your sake. Links are in the description. Share with your recalcitrant and reprobate friends and family freely. Blue Collar Reformation is a lightweight and mobile outreach platform. Take it in hand and enter the fray. Godspeed.